a fading piece of cloth around his nose, pick up his broom, and begin his work. To the world, he was just a street sweeper. People walked past him without a second glance. Nobody knew the secret he carried. While others saw trash, God's power saw treasure. He collected every discarded book he could find in dustbins, gutters, and by the roadside. Torn pages, old textbooks, abandoned notebooks. These were his gold. His tiny room was stacked from floor to ceiling with books that others had thrown away. He couldn't afford to go to school or buy new books, so this was his only way. He taught himself. At night, when his body ached from a long day of sweeping, God's power's real work began. He didn't have electricity, so he would sit under a street light, the only source of light he had. Mosquitoes would feast on him, and his eyes would burn from the strain, but he read on, page after page. People in his neighborhood would mock him. Look at this one pretending to be educated. They'd sneer. Sweeping is your job, just focus on that. But their words were just noise. God's power kept his head down and his eyes on his books. He knew his destiny was bigger than the dust he swept. One morning, a professor on his way to campus noticed something unusual. He saw God's power, sitting beside a dustbin, deeply engrossed in an advanced physics textbook. Intrigued and a little shocked, the professor stopped. He asked God's power a question from the book, then another, and another. To his astonishment, God's power answered every single one with perfect clarity. The professor returned the next day, this time with a stack of newer books. The week after, he brought past exam papers. Then, one day, he handed God's power a small scholarship form. With hands that trembled with hope, God's power filled it out. The months that followed were a blur of sweeping and studying. He poured every ounce of his energy into the books, learning from pages twice his age. When the exam results were released, God's power had scored higher than the professor's own students. The university was so impressed they invited him to join, first as a volunteer assistant, and then as an instructor. On his first day as a lecturer, God's power walked into the hall wearing his old street sweeper uniform, not because he had nothing else to wear, but as a powerful statement. He wanted every student who ever felt small or looked down upon to understand a simple truth. Greatness doesn't care about your background. It only asks if you are willing to fight for your growth. As he entered the lecture hall, a wave of applause erupted. The same people who once ignored him on the street were now on their feet, clapping for him. Tears welled up in God's power's eyes. For the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible. He wasn't just the sweeper. He was Mr. God's Power Otundi, a lecturer, a mentor, and living proof that your destiny can rise from the dust. Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that uplifts.